the divine spirit transmigrates into another man. The Buddhist Tartars believe in a great number of living Buddhas, who officiate as great lamas at the head of the most important monasteries. When one of these great lamas dies, his disciples do not sorrow, for they know that he will soon reappear, being born in the form of an infant. Their only anxiety is to discover the place of his birth. If at the time they see a rainbow, they take it as a sign sent them by the departed Lama to guide them to his cradle. Sometimes the divine infant himself reveals his identity. "I am the Grand Lama," he says, "the living Buddha of such and such a temple. Take me to my old monastery. I am its immortal head." In whatever way the birthplace of the Buddha is revealed, whether by the Buddha's own avowal or by the sign in the sky, tents are struck, and the joyful pilgrims, often headed by the king or one of the most illustrious of the royal family, set forth to find and bring home the infant god. Generally he is born in Tibet, the Holy Land, and to reach him the caravan has often to traverse the most frightful desert. When at last they find the child, they fall down and worship him. Before, however, he is acknowledged as the Grand Lama whom they seek, he must satisfy them of his identity. He is asked the name of the monastery of which he claims to be the head, how far off it is, and how many monks live in it. He must also describe the habits of the deceased Great Lama and the manner of his death. Then various articles, as prayer books, teapots, and cups, are placed before him, and he has to point out those used by himself in his previous life. If he does so without a mistake, his claims are admitted, and he is conducted in triumph to the monastery. At the head of all the lamas is the Dalai Lama of Lhasa, the Rome of Tibet. He is regarded as a living god, and at death his divine and immortal spirit is born again in a child. According to some accounts, the mode of discovering the Dalai Lama is similar to the method already described, of discovering an ordinary Grand Lama. Other accounts speak of an election by drawing lots from a golden jar. Wherever he is born, the trees and plants put forth green leaves. At his bidding, flowers bloom and springs of water rise, and his presence diffuses heavenly blessings. But he is by no means the only man who poses as a god in these regions. A register of all the incarnate gods in the Chinese Empire is kept in the Li Fan Yan or Colonial Office at Peking. The number of gods who have thus taken out a license is 160. Tibet is blessed with 30 of them, northern Mongolia rejoices in 19, and southern Mongolia basks in the sunshine of no less than 57. The Chinese government, with a paternal solicitude for the welfare of its subjects, forbids the gods on the register to be reborn anywhere but in Tibet. They fear lest the birth of a god in Mongolia should have serious political consequences by stirring the dormant patriotism and warlike spirit of the Mongols, who might rally around an ambitious native deity of royal lineage and seek to win for him, at the point of the sword, a temporal as well as a spiritual kingdom. But besides these public or licensed gods, there are a great many little private gods, or unlicensed practitioners of divinity, who work miracles and bless their people in holes and corners, and of late years the Chinese government has winked at the rebirth of these pettifogging deities outside of Tibet. However, once they are born, the government keeps its eye on them as well as on the regular practitioners, and if any of them misbehaves, he is promptly degraded, banished to a distinct monastery, and strictly forbidden ever to be born again in the flesh. From our survey of the religious position occupied by the king in rude societies, we may infer that the claim to divine and supernatural powers put forward by the monarchs of great historical empires like those of Egypt, Mexico, and Peru was not the simple outcome of inflated vanity or the empty expressions of a grovelling adulation. It was merely a survival and extension of the old savage apotheosis of living kings. Thus, for example, as children of the sun, the Incas of Peru were revered like gods. They could do no wrong, and no one dreamed of offending against the person, honor, or property of the monarch or of any of the royal race. Hence, too, the Incas did not, like most people, look on sickness as an evil. They considered it a messenger sent from their father the sun to call them to come and rest with him in heaven. Therefore the usual words in which an Inca announced his approaching end were these: "My father calls me to come and rest with him." They would not oppose their father's will by offering sacrifice for recovery, but openly declared that he had called them to his rest. Issuing from the sultry valleys upon the lofty tableland of the Colombian Andes, the Spanish conquerors were astonished to find, in contrast to the savage hordes they had left in the sweltering jungles below, a people enjoying a fair degree of civilization, practicing agriculture, and living under a government which Humboldt has compared to the theocracies of Tibet and Japan. These were the Chibchas, Muyscas, or Muschas, divided into two kingdoms, with capitals at Bogota and Tunja, but united apparently in spiritual allegiance to the high pontiff of Sogamoso or Iraca. By a long and ascetic novitiate, this ghostly ruler was reputed to have acquired such sanctity that the waters and the rain obeyed him, and the weather depended on his will. The Mexican kings at their accession, as we have seen, took an oath that they would make the sun to shine, the clouds to give rain, the rivers to flow, and the earth to bring forth fruits in abundance. We are told that Montezuma, the last king of Mexico, was worshipped by his people as a god. The early Babylonian kings, from the time of Sargon I till the fourth dynasty of Ur or later, claimed to be gods in their lifetime. The monarchs of the fourth dynasty of Ur in particular had temples built in their honor. They set up their statues in various sanctuaries and commanded the people to sacrifice to them. The 8th month was especially dedicated to the kings, and sacrifices were offered to them at the new moon and on the 15th of each month. Again, the Parthian monarchs of the Arsacid house styled themselves brothers of the sun and moon, and were worshipped as deities. It was esteemed sacrilege to strike even a private member of the Arsacid family in a brawl. The kings of Egypt were deified in their lifetime, sacrifices were offered to them, and their worship was celebrated in special temples and by special priests. Indeed, the worship of the kings sometimes cast that of the gods into the shade. Thus, in the reign of Merenra, a high official declared that he had built many holy places in order that the spirit of the king, the ever-living Merenra, might be invoked more than all the gods. It has never been doubted that the king claimed actual divinity. He was the great god, the golden Horus, and son of Ra. He claimed authority not only over Egypt, but over all lands and nations, the whole world and its length and its breadth, the entire compass of the great circuit of the sun, the sky and what is in it, the earth and all that is upon it, every creature that walks upon 2 or upon 4 legs, all that fly or flutter, the whole world offers her productions to him. Whatever in fact might be asserted of the sun god was dogmatically predicable of the king of Egypt. His titles were directly derived from those of the sun god. In the course of his existence, we are told, the king of Egypt exhausted all the possible conceptions of divinity which the Egyptians had framed for themselves. A superhuman god by his birth and by his royal office, he became the deified man after his death. Thus all that was known of the divine was summed up in him. We have now completed our sketch, for it is no more than a sketch of the evolution of that sacred kingship, which attained its highest form, its most absolute expression, in the monarchies of Peru and Egypt. Historically, the institution appears to have originated in the order of public magicians or medicine men. Logically, it rests on a mistaken deduction from the association of ideas. Men mistook the order of their ideas for the order of nature, and hence imagined that the control which they have or seem to have over their thoughts permitted them to exercise a corresponding control over things. The men who for one reason or another, because of the strength or the weakness of their natural parts, were supposed to possess these magical powers in the highest degree, were gradually marked off from their fellows and became a separate class, who was destined to exercise a most far-reaching influence on the political, religious, and intellectual evolution of mankind. Social progress, as we know, consists mainly in a successive differentiation of functions, or, in simpler language, a division of labour. The work which in primitive society is done by all alike, and by all equally ill, or nearly so, is gradually distributed among different classes of workers and executed